During World War II, Japanese Americans faced a tremendous amount of discrimination solely due to their ethnicity. The most substantial act of discrimination was the internment of Japanese Americans on the west coast of the United States. Though struck down by a potent tsunami of racial inequality during the war years, Japanese Americans silently tolerated these unforgivable acts by practicing the Japanese value of gaman, the ability to endure situations that are uncomfortable without showing any emotion, and the Japanese attitude of shikata ga nai, it can't be helped. After Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized military personnel to declare areas of the U.S. as military zones in which any or all persons may be excluded. The order generated a mass evacuation of 120,000 Japanese American men, women, and children in the mainland United States. Japanese Americans had only a week to sell, donate, or leave the belongings that they could not carry during the evacuation. Confusion and pain were some of the emotions that Japanese Americans faced when they were forced to leave their homes. Everything that they had worked for diligently was going to be gone in a mere week. By June 1942, the Japanese Americans were transported into small, short-term assembly centers. Assembly center housing sometimes consisted of recently used horse stalls that reeked of the smell of sour manure. By November, the Japanese Americans were transported to 19 different long-term internment camps throughout the United States. Camps were located in secluded areas and were unprotected from harsh weather. Camps were lined with barbed wire fencing. Guards equipped with machine guns or sniper rifles overlooked camps day and night from watchtowers. Typical housing conditions in an internment camp were barracks that were uninsulated and tar-papered. Internees ate in large communal mess halls and took care of their business in communal restrooms. During the internment, 4 years of the internees' lives were spent inside of these horrific camps. Internees made the most of their time in the camps by setting up schools, farms, newspapers, and other groups that could be found in a regular community. In December 1944, the government announced the end of Executive Order 9066, also ending the exclusion of Japanese Americans from the west coast of the United States. However, it was not until March of 1946 that the last camp had closed. After 4 long years, many Japanese Americans would return home to find their houses destroyed and vandalized. In other cases, businesses were built on the land that they had leased, leaving them homeless and bankrupt. Post-war discrimination made jobs hard to come by, but the Japanese Americans accepted their situation and started to work at any jobs that would employ them. Most Japanese Americans chose to have the shikata ga nai, it can't be helped attitude about the internment and continued on with their lives as if they could not do anything about it. However, a few courageous Japanese Americans such as Fred Korematsu chose to speak up against the outrageous terms and treatment during the internment.
Well, I actually didn't make a decision that was more or less forced on me by me being arrested and so forth. I felt that, that, hey, this is wrong, and that I was an American.
When the government issued the evacuation order, Fred Korematsu resisted the mandate by refusing to leave his home. When he did not follow the command, he was arrested and was convicted of disobeying a government order. In 1944, Fred Korematsu appealed his case to the Supreme Court, which questioned the constitutionality of the internment. Years later, researchers found hidden key documents that showed that the Japanese Americans had done nothing wrong that justified the mass internment. This means that Fred Korematsu's actions were justified. In 1998, Fred Korematsu received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Bill Clinton for his bravery. In a time of extraordinary conflict, Fred Korematsu stood up for his rights as an American citizen. In 1986, Patricia Saiki, a Japanese American who was an advocate for the compensation of Japanese Americans that were affected by the internment, was elected into Congress as a freshman in the House of Representatives. Representative Saiki encouraged Congress to pass the Reparations Act and most importantly convinced President Ronald Reagan to sign the Reparations Act. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which acknowledged the nation's wrongdoing during a time of great struggle. Thanks to Representative Saiki, the Japanese Americans were compensated for their treatment in the internment camps during World War II. The act provided compensation checks for $20,000 and an apology signed by President George W. Bush for surviving Japanese Americans that were interned in the camps.
We're all human beings and we should all be treated equally, especially in the United States, we're in the land of the free, and we should be encouraging people to come here if they need to come. I think that discrimination is wrong right out.
We must never, ever forget what the Japanese Americans endured during the internment. We must not let what happened to the Japanese Americans during World War II to happen again to any ethnic group now or in the future. Due to mass hysteria and fear, history is tempted to repeat itself in today's world. It is essential that we do not let it reoccur. Though the past can never be undone, we must learn from the mistakes that were made and strive to make the world a better place.